Well, hello. Good morning from Vienna in Austria, but wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see some folks getting up super late. Don't worry, this is all recorded. Get some rest, please. Learning happens best when you're all well rested. So, I'm going to start saying hello to people. Let's see where in the world you all are joining in from. We got somebody, Victor from Nigeria. Hello. Anna from Texas. Yeah, see, it's late there. Get some rest too, please. I hope you're getting enough rest. Sil is coming in from Sydney. Hello. Carlos from Spain. Hi, good morning. Let's see. Got somebody from Melbourne, from Kenya. Oh my goodness, I love seeing where people. Hey, Timmy Phil from Germany, not too far from here. Well, hope everybody's having a wonderful day today. Welcome to day 6. Am I counting right? Yes, it's day 6 of the free JavaScript Bootcamp. If you're tuning in for the first time, hi, I'm Ramon. We are doing a free bootcamp to learn JavaScript based on FreeCodeCamp's materials. We're doing that in collaboration with Class Central. So if you want to sign up for the bootcamp, I've got some links for you. First off, if you want to enroll to the bootcamp, go to classcentral.com. There you'll find everything you need, including a link to FreeCodeCamp. You see it here. Go sign up there if you want to get your certification based on the projects. Let's see. If you've got any questions or concerns that with the learning, please go to group.classcentral.com. There you'll find the forum, where you'll also find a link to the community on Discord. We've got a Discord server as well, where people are answering questions and asking questions, of course. Next up, we've got our code of conduct. So we expect all learners and participants to abide by this code of conduct. And if you have any violations or any other concerns to report, please do so at this email address, bootcamp@class-central.com. Oh, we got more hellos from around the world. Let's see. We got Rania from Saudi Arabia. Hello. From Italy, from Zambia, from Jordan, Afghanistan, Indonesia, Kenya, Ghana, Kenya. Wow. This always makes me so happy to see. And thank you all so much for joining in today. So let's jump right in. Remember, this is all recorded. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So any questions you have, don't forget, we will answer them. We'll be bookmarking your questions, and then we'll be going through as many of them as possible. And as always, I'm going to try and prioritize questions that are related to the content of the lesson today. But if there's any questions about previous homework as well, that will also be highly prioritized. All right, let's jump right in. So we are learning ES6, or ECMAScript 2015. And as you remember from yesterday or the last lesson, this is a new specification of the JavaScript language, which has been standardized and is being rolled out to browsers. And of course, used in other contexts like server-side JavaScript. So what we'll be doing today is carry on from where the homework left off. So the homework yesterday, we had very little homework, was just to do this one here. Use destructuring assignment to pass an object as a function's parameters. And remember, if you're behind, don't worry. You've got support. You've got all of us. There are 7,000 of us signed up in this boot camp. Please ask each other questions. Please catch up on the recordings. Take your time, rewatch them. Remember, this is self-paced. This will not just end after 6 weeks. The support will still be there afterwards, and you can get your FreeCodeCamp certificate at any time. Back to the ES6. So we learned a lot yesterday about REST. We learned a lot about spread. We learned about destructuring. Today, we're going to be starting off with creating strings using template literals. Now, if you remember a few lessons back, folks were already, when we were talking about strings, asking about template literals. And before doing any exercise or reading anything, I just want to introduce template literals in a way, and what they are. And in essence, what they are is a new way introduced with ES6 to create strings. And what's cool about it is that it lets us do a lot of things that we were doing in the past with some complication a lot more easily. So, just a quick sip. All right. Let's define a const called age. And we'll make it not my age. I'm not 56, I promise. So if we wanted to put that age in a string and say, hello, I am age years old, the best way to do it would be, or the previous way we did it, pardon me, would be, I'm just going to answer a quick question here that's I think is important. I'm still in the third lesson. Can I follow this lesson? I would recommend following the lessons in order. And for example, we're doing part 2 of ES6 today. So I would recommend, I mean, if you want to stick around and things click, absolutely. But don't worry, you will be able to catch up using the recordings. So if something is going over your head, ask questions. That's what I'm here for. I will answer them at the end. Cool. So, right. If we wanted to say, hello, I am age years old, using strings, we would say, hello, I am space, and we would add age, space, new string, space, years old. Let's console log that greeting. Hello, I am 56 years old, right? That's one way to do it. But with template literals, we have a new way of creating strings that's a little simplified. Let me show you what I mean. So instead of using single quote marks or double quote marks, template literals let us use something called the backtick. You'll find it in your keyboard, usually at the top left of an English keyboard. This is the backtick. It kind of looks like a single quote mark, but it's like pretty tilted. So make sure not to mix up the backtick, which again is tilted, with the single quote mark, which is straight down. Again, backtick, tilted. But with the backtick, we can do the same thing we were doing before. Hello, I am. However, it lets us do something called string interpolation, which means that we can put values into a string. So using the $ and the curly brackets, we can now put an expression into our string. So for example, let's put an age, years old. We just make this a tiny bit wider. So yeah, now with template literals, we can use the $ and the curly brackets to say, hey, let's stop the string for just a second so I can put in some JavaScript. And isn't that significantly nicer? No string addition, no worrying about spaces, because you're in control of how the string is written. Hello, I am 56 years old. I find this really nice. There's other ways that template literals make it easier for us to write strings. For example, what if we wanted to have a new line in our string? In the old way, let me just comment out my template literal. I would have to say \n, good to meet you. Remember, we learned that, I think, in the first lesson or the second one. Hello, I am 56 years old. New line, good to meet you. With template literals, you can just hit enter as if it were a new line and type in good to meet you. Check it out. Hello, I am 56 years old. Good to meet you. I got a question here that I need to answer. Is it widely used when we do programming? Template literals? Yes. This is an addition of ES6 that I see quite often. And a lot of what we introduce in ES6 can be done in older JavaScript, but in your day-to-day, you will encounter both. So it's really important to be familiar with them. I really love Sill's advice, by the way. I want to just highlight it real quick. Better to do a bit of coding every day than only once in a while. You will see that you will improve much faster, even if you spend only time on one chapter. Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying this. Yeah. So that's template literals. Let's take a look at our exercise real quick. This console, oh yeah. Here's our exercise, pardon me. Use the template literal syntax with backticks to create an array of list element strings. Each list element's text should be one of the array elements from the failure property on the result object and have a class attribute with a value text warning. The makeList function should return the array of list item strings. Use an iterator method, any kind of loop, to get the desired output shown below. All right, so we've got a couple of things. First, we're going to be creating some what looks like HTML. Now, if you're doing JavaScript and haven't encountered HTML, don't worry, we'll walk through it today. However, I do want to take a moment to highlight that Jess, a far better and kinder teacher than I am, is doing a really cool bootcamp on web development that covers HTML and CSS right here on classcentral.com. Go check it out. It takes place later in the day. Okay, and remember, keep those questions coming. We will be bookmarking them and getting to them at the end. I might not be able to answer all of them because we do have to cover the content. All right. So let me delete my code here and see. Let's take a look at the code on the right now. We've got an object called result with 3 properties. One is success with an array of strings. One is failure with an array of strings. And the third one is skipped with a lot of strings. Then we have a function called makeList that takes an array as a parameter that declares a const called failure items and returns that array of failure items. And then finally on line 14, we have a const called failures list, which is set to be the return of this function makeList, where we're passing in result.failure. So we're going to be passing the failure arrays in. Now let's read that example again. Use template literal syntax with backticks to create an array of list elements. Each list element's text should be one of the array elements from the failure property on the result object and have a class attribute with the value text warning. And have a class, the makeList function should return the array of list item strings. And they'll look like this, which is cool. Now, couple things to do. I can see here we're going to have to go right in here. I want to break this down. First, we want to use a loop to go through all of the members of the array. Now, we've done loops before. Let's do for let I equals 0. I must be smaller than r.length. Yes. And I will go up by 1 with each passing of the loop. And I just want to first console log member of the array at that index. Cool. So we can see here no var, var on top, line break, which is good. Next, let's construct that template literal and put it in. Because what we want to do, I've got a question here from MP, please explain the problem. We want to take this array and create HTML elements out of it with the string inside of it. We'll see what it means in just a second to do that. So we're now iterating through each of them and then printing them out into the console, which is good. But next we want to create that HTML element, right? And the cool thing is we can use template literals to do this. So let's call it element and make it be equal to, and here we'll use the template literal. And now I'm just going to write out li class equals text warning. Close the tag. And now I need to have that value, which with template literals can be done like that. With a $sign and a curly bracket, r at index I. And I need to close that list element. Yep, this is HTML. So there we go. I want to console log that element just to see how it looks. Let me make this a little bit wider so it's a little bit less difficult to read. So we've got that template literal, and into it we are embedding, we are interpolating that array member at index I. And there we can see we got li no var, li with var on top, and li with line break, which is good, except we're not quite done with our exercise, because even though we're constructing those string template literals, we still need to put them into our array to return. So pretty straightforward. I should be able to, and we've learned this before, failure items dot push element. I want to test that this is working, however. So what I'm going to do, we've got a const failures list equals make list result dot failure, console.log failures list. And there's our array. First one, the second one, and the third one. Cool. Let's run our test and see how that looks. And there we go. We'll give ourselves a little pat on the back, and let's move on to the next challenge. Okay. For this next exercise, what we're going to be doing is learning about using object literal declarations. This is another syntactic sugar, as I mentioned yesterday. And syntactic sugar is really kind of like making the programmer's life a little bit easier by having them write a little bit less. That's added to ES6 in order to be able to construct objects in a shorter way. So let's do that. Let me show you what I mean. Before we do any of this, let's create our own 3 variables. A equal, no, let's call it name. Name equals Giovanni. Age equals 56. Const, let's see, location. Oh, Viridian City. Now, if I wanted to create an object with these out of these 3 variables, const person, I could do that with name colon name, age colon age, and location colon location, which is totally a way to do it. Let's console log our person and see what happens. So we've got our object. Name is Giovanni, age is 56, location is Viridian City, which is all well and good. But because the name of the key and the variable that it's stored in are the same, what ES6 lets us do is say, hey, forget the colon and the value, just use that. Just use that. Just use that. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is this name sort of struck through? And I have to say, I have no idea. I would like to disregard it for now. So we've got name, we've got age, we've got location. I do want to answer one question real quick, if I may. Got absolutely lost with this HTML thing. So YouTube Live lets you rewind. Go back and watch it. Don't worry, this is all recorded. If you have any questions about how to do it, we can go back in the Q&A and also do it again. So don't worry, we will carry on. And remember, this is all recorded. Ask lots of questions. So back to object literals. If the name and the value where it's stored have the same, you can just use the shorthand. And that's what the object literal declarations lets us do, which is quite nice because now I can just put it in one line and it looks nice and straightforward. But short, I still don't know why this is struck through, but I'm going to ignore it. Don't worry about it. Now let's look at our exercise real quick. Use object property shorthand with object literals to create and return an object with a name, an age, and gender properties. Oh, okay, cool. So we got create person, we got name, age, and gender, and this returns name, name, age, age, gender, gender. And with object literals, we have learned that we can remove that, remove this, and remove that, because the parameters being passed are name, age, and gender. And as long as that has the same name as the key, we can use that literal. So let's run our test and see how it looks. There we go. Pat, pat. What have we got next? Writing concise declarative functions with ES6. Now, here's a fun fact about objects in JavaScript, which we see here. And I don't think we've done this yet, or if we did, it was in the homework and I forgot. But let's take a look at the code on the right. We've got a const bicycle, which is an object with two properties. One is gear, and the other one is set gear, right? But here's something odd. Set gear is not a value that's like a number or a string or a Boolean. This property is a function. And what does that function do? It changes, it calls this dot gear equals new gear. Now, before we mess around with this code, I just want to console log and see what's going on here. Console log bicycle. Then we're going to call that console log with bicycle again. So on line 9, we do console log bicycle. It shows us gear is 2 and set gear is a function, which we already knew. Then we call that set gear function, bicycle.setGear3. Then if we do a console log on bicycle again, it says that the gear is set to 3 and we still have our set gear function. So what's going on in this set gear function? And what is this? This is something that you will be encountering in JavaScript quite a bit, and I recommend reading up on how it works as well. We will also cover it a little bit. But in short, this refers to, in this context, oh, this is hard to say. So this right here is referring to this object. Yeah? So if we want to get access to this gear value inside the object, in a function inside the object, let's check it out. Console log gear. Let's see what happens. Just remove this real quick. Remove these console logs real quick. Check it out. Reference error, gear is not defined. You might be thinking, but hold on, I already have a property called gear. How do I get access to that gear property inside my object's function? That's where this comes in. So this dot gear refers to the bicycle itself. Play around with this. It's really weird at first. Check it out. If I do console log this, you'll see gear. It's the bicycle itself. But what if I do it outside? What if I do it out here? Outside of the object, this, there is no this that we're referring to, so JavaScript says it's undefined. As Carlos says really well, this 3 equals bicycle. I think that's very concisely put. This dot gear is nothing but object name dot gear. Thank you very much, Manoj. Yeah, so that's how it works. But what are we doing? In line 5, we're saying this dot gear is equals to new gear, which is a parameter of that function. Right? So we are changing the gear property of the bicycle to have the value 3. And that's why you see gear is 2 and set gear, and then gear is 3 and then set gear. Oh, I like this. Jose says, this dot gear is the same as bicycle dot gear. Absolutely. But this when you call this, you need to be inside the object for this to be true. Love it. Asanta's saying, is this linked to getters and setters? We will be getting there in just a few minutes. Okay, let's carry on. What's our exercise actually? So again, ES6 gives us a nice and concise way to declare functions inside an object. What this lets us do, and we can see that here, is we can have the name of the object and then brackets. Let's try it out. Before we mess around with any of this, let's say print gear. We'll have brackets and then the curly brackets. I forgot my comma here. Console log. Let's use template literals. I have this dot gear gears, not tiers, gears. So let's call bicycle dot print gear. There we go. I have 2 gears. So there are 2 ways of declaring objects in JavaScript and ES6 in that matter. This is the sort of more old school way with setGear colon function and the parameters, or you do it like this, much more shorthand. Name a function, the parameters, and then the brackets. Keep those questions coming, folks. I love them. Remember, we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay, so our exercise will be to redeclare this setGear function to be done with that shorthand. And what's cool is all we have to do is delete function and the colon, and we're done. Bicycle.printGear is not a function. I deleted the function. That's why. SetGear 3 console log bicycle.gear. Let's see. 3. So yeah, this is the shorter hand way of declaring a function inside an object in JavaScript with ES6. Let's run our tests, and we're done. Pat, pat. All right. Now we're doing classes. And this is something that's also brought in by ES6 and allows us to create objects from a template. There are lots of different ways of explaining classes. Here's one that I like. A class is a declaration, say like a recipe, right? For, I don't know, banana bread. Okay? And when you've got this recipe for a banana bread, you've got a set of ingredients and some steps to create that banana bread. And in theory, if you follow those steps and use those ingredients to the letter, you will always get a banana bread. Let's play around with it and you'll see what I mean. Okay? Let's ignore the code for now. Let's comment it out, in fact. Yeah. Wonderful. So let's say we have a class of, we'll just go with banana bread. Okay, so we'll use this new keyword called class. Then the name of the class is capital camel case. That is, the first letter will be capitalized. Yeah, so we've got a class called banana bread, and it will have a constructor. Most classes will have constructors. This is a function that will be called when you create a new instance of this class. We'll see what that means in just a second. This dot taste is equals to yummy. We can declare any kinds of functions for a class. The constructor is one that you will always see. We'll get to that in just a second. Let's say we'll have another function here called eat. And all that will do is print out console log, and then this dot taste. And again, we're using template literals to do that. So when we create let's say we want to create an object out of this class. Yeah, we'll use a const called bread. Now, if we want to create an instance of banana bread, we would be using the keyword new banana bread. Now that we've made an instance of our banana bread, we can just called bread.eat. And there you go. This calls the eat function in our banana bread class that prints out and the taste. Yummy. Fabulous. And let's try a couple more. Keep those questions coming, folks. I see them. We will save them for the Q&A. Unless there's something blocking. So const, let's make another bread equals new banana bread. And the same way we can interact with this, these are now two different instances of banana bread. Another bread that eat yummy. Now, here's something that I'm wondering. Console log is bread equals to another bread? Let's find out. Now, here's something important. Even though these two objects, and they are objects, are from the same recipe, from the same class, they are not equal because they are different instances. Yeah? But if I were to console log that bread, you'll see what we have here is that property taste. Now you're probably wondering, okay, but what good is this if I'm just going to be making all the same banana breads? Well, let's go back to the constructor for just a second, because the constructor can actually take a parameter and we can give it any parameter we want. I'm going to go with taste. Yeah. Now, if I want to save this parameter to my object, well, I'll just do that. Now, this is going to seem confusing at first, and I recommend coming back and playing around with this, because taste and this.taste are different. Taste is the parameter that we're passing to the constructor. This.taste is a property saved on the object. When we set taste to be the same, when we set taste, sorry, let me repeat myself. When we set this.taste to be taste, then I'm storing the value of the parameter into the object. But this can be anything. Let's call it good taste. Good taste. Okay? This is the property that's saved on the object. This is the parameter passed to the constructor of the class. So what does this mean? Let's go ahead and create a new banana bread again. Const bread equals new banana bread. Let's do bread.eat. Take a look at what happened. I made a new banana bread without a taste, right? So when I went to eat, console log said, undefined. Which, yeah, is odd. So how do I pass in that parameter? That's done here. So when I say new banana bread, what I'm really doing is making a new object and calling that constructor function. So if I pass in a parameter here, banana e, we've got banana e. Instead of this.taste, would just taste not work? No, as said, this is the property of the object, and this is a parameter. If I were to just say, good taste, check it out. Good taste is not defined. There is no local parameter called good taste. But this.goodTaste is a property of the object we're working inside. It can be confusing at first, and I recommend coming back to this and messing around with it. But again, what's the point of this? Let's go with const another bread again. Now, I can make a new banana bread with a different taste. Let's put chocolate bits. Chocolates. Oh, exclamation mark. And if I were to eat that another banana bread, it would be chocolates. So this way I can define objects that are complex in structure, but still share a lot of functions and properties. So that was a lot. Let's go back and look at our exercise. Use the class keyword and write a constructor to create the vegetable class. The vegetable class allows you to create a vegetable object with a property name that gets passed to the constructor. First part. Class called vegetable. And you'll notice I'm capitalizing it because classes are first letter capitalized. We'll define our constructor method, which takes in as a parameter name. And then we want to create a vegetable object with a property name that gets passed to the constructor. So this dot name is equals to name. Let's look at line 9. Const carrot equals new vegetable with the name carrot. If we console log carrot.name, we'll see we're getting carrot. But let's make a couple more. Const, let's say, like purple equals new vegetable with the name beet. We're printing out the carrot.name, but if we print out purple.name, we'll get beet. Okay? I got a question from Ali that I want to answer. Can you use default naming? Of course, you can use default parameters. What's another vegetable? Are potatoes vegetables? We're going with potato. I think potatoes are vegetables. Let's give it a try. Const veg new vegetable potato. No class, no parameter, pardon me. Check it out. In line 11, we've made a new vegetable without passing in a parameter. And remember from the other lesson, if you have a default parameter and you don't pass in a name, it will use the default one. Folks, I know a lot of this is confusing, and this is why I strongly recommend coming back, rewatching these, and doing the exercises as well. So console.log veg.name. Oh yeah, we don't have veg anymore. We have carrot. All right, let's restore everything. We've got our class vegetable. We've got our constructor with a name, which stores that name in the object. That looks good. Let's run our tests. Pat. So let's move on to the next exercise. And we're jumping through a lot of stuff here, folks. As Sil says, I think this section on ES6 may be a bit hard because we switch between concepts really quickly, but rewatch and look up extra information, MDN, to get a better understanding. And I think this is great. Thank you. So, as we've seen before in classes, we can obtain values from an object and set the value of a property within that object. But what we can do as well is have special functions called getters and setters. And I'll tell you what, I want to do that with this example we have here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this class. We'll walk through it. We'll ignore everything going on here and go straight into the class. So we've got constructor. We've got a class called book with 3 functions. One is constructor with author. And here we store this dot author to be author. But notice it's got an underscore. This is a naming convention, not obligatory. So don't get thrown off by this. This is just a typing convention done by this exercise. So when we create a new book, and let's try it out. Const book equals, const nice book equals new book with an author, which will be you. So const nice book equals new book you. I see an error. Thermostat is not defined. Don't worry about this error. We're messing around in the editor right now with the book class. So let's console log nice book dot author. Oh yeah, let's comment out the rest of the exercise for now. That's why it's not letting me go anywhere. Now check it out. Nicebook.author is giving us undefined. That's because the property is called underscore author. There you go. So if we console log nicebook.author, we get you. But that underscore, when you see them in different programming languages, what it usually means is it's encouraged not to interact with this outside of the class. Because let's take a look at line 15, where the class defines something called get and then writer, the function. And let's see what it does. In line 16, it returns this dot author. This is called a getter, which means we want to get a value from inside of classes. Simplicity says, so we can avoid underscore. You will see it. You don't have to use it, but it usually is like the coder's way of telling you like, hey, you can ignore this. You can ignore this from outside the class, mind you, sorry. So nice. So let's do console log nicebook dot, and then we'll call the function writer with brackets. Sorry, without brackets. Sorry. We will call up that writer getter. Yeah, this is called a getter. You can see it there. And that gives us you. But then in line 19, we have something else that's interesting, which is called a setter. This lets us set the value of a property. So we have set and then the name writer. And then we have as a parameter the new author, the updated author. And let's take a look at what it does in line 20. This dot underscore author is equals to updated author. As Savarko says, is author a static variable? Not quite, because you see in line 20, we are changing that author. But from inside the class using this special setter function. Yeah? Let's see what that means. Nicebook.writer is equals to me. So by doing nicebook.writer equals, ES6 is automatically calling this setter function and updating this dot author. Why no brackets on line 24? Because this is a setter function. So this is a setter. So we're not really calling the functions as much as we're using the assignment operator to set that value. All right, that's a lot. That's a lot. Let's go back to our exercise and see what we'll be doing today. Whoa, okay, we got a lot. Okay, use the class keyword to create a thermostat class. The constructor accepts a Fahrenheit temperature. In the class, create a getter to obtain the temperature in Celsius and a setter to set the temperature in Celsius. Remember that C, or Celsius, is 5 divided by 9 times Fahrenheit temperature minus 32, and Fahrenheit temperature is equals to C, or the Celsius temperature, times 9.0 divided by 5 plus 32. Whew. Where F is the value of the temperature in Fahrenheit and C is the value of the same temperature in Celsius. Okay. When you implement this, you will track the temperature inside of the class in one scale, either Fahrenheit or Celsius. This is the power of a getter and setter. You are creating an API, and you might have seen API. APIs commonly are referred for servers where we interact with data, but API stands for Application Programming Layer. No, Application Programming Interface, pardon me, which in essence is a way that you interact with a specific module. In this case, being the class. So even though you create a thermostat in Fahrenheit, you will interact with it, write, get, and set in Celsius. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. In other words, you are abstracting implementation details from the user. Now, as always, I'm going to divide this into a lot of parts. Let's start with the class. Use a class keyword to create a thermostat class. Thermostat, being a class, is first letter capitalized. Here's our class. So far, so good. Next, the constructor accepts a Fahrenheit temperature. We can do that. So constructor, and it accepts a Fahrenheit temperature. So I'll call it Fahrenheit. I always spell it wrong. Okay. This dot Fahrenheit is equals to Fahrenheit. But remember that this is going to be an internal property. So if I want to follow the convention that we did, for example, with the author, I will go with underscore F temp. Yeah, this dot underscore Fahrenheit temperature. Cool. So we've done that. Let's make a new thermostat, and I want to console log it. Whoopsie. Hold up. And let me just make this a little bit wider so we have some more space. Console log thermos. So we've got an object whose F temp is 76. We've made a new thermostat with a Fahrenheit of 76 and stored it in the variable thermos. So far, so good. But we want to let temp equals thermos.temperature. That's where we're going to have our first getter. So get temperature. Now we're going to return this dot underscore F temp. Console log temp. Now, notice this. Cannot set property temperature of thermostat, which only has a getter. That's because in line 15, we're trying to set the temperature, but we don't have a setter. We only have a getter. So I'm telling you what, we're going to actually do this for just a moment. Manush is asking, why are we not using a function for the constructor? And we are, right here, line 3. That's the constructor is a function. Mitch is asking, is it correct that getters never take a parameter, but setters always do? Yes, because getters, you don't want to, well, not always. I can think of situations where you might want to pass something to a getter to do something, interact or calculate something with an internal property and then return something new. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But yeah, in general, this is a good rule of thumb. So, okay, we've got a getter, all well and good. However, in the class, create a getter to obtain the temperature in Celsius. Right now, this getter is returning Fahrenheit. This is where we have to do math. I'm not ready to do math, but we got to try. So the Celsius temperature is 5 divided by 9 times Fahrenheit minus 32. And I'm just going to do that. Return 5 divided by 9 times, now we need the Fahrenheit temperature. So we'll do this dot underscore F temp minus 32. So far, so good. And in fact, when we do let temp equals thermostat temperature, which is about 24.44 in Celsius, we can see that's what it's giving us. It's got more fours because it's not a precise number, but that's okay. It's approximately 24.44. Now we'll move on to the setter. Thermostat temperature equals 26. Now, if we remember, to set the temperature, we'll do Celsius. We'll call it C temp to be consistent. Okay. Now we're setting the temperature in Celsius, but we're still storing our temperature in Fahrenheit. So we will have to convert this C temp into Fahrenheit. This dot F temp will be, and now we're going to use this math again. So it's Celsius, so C temp times 9.0 divided by 5 plus 32. Whew, that's complex. But okay, so now we're taking that Celsius temperature, converting it to Fahrenheit, and then storing it in the object, which should be thermostat temperature should be 26 in Celsius. Let's give it a try. Console log temp is 26. Let's take a step back and examine what we've done. Made a class thermostat with a constructor, a getter that gives us Celsius from a Fahrenheit temperature, and a setter that turns a Celsius temperature into Fahrenheit for storage. Let's run our tests. Phew, pat, pat. Let's keep going. Cool. Now we're going to be doing a little bit of HTML. I want to be very clear. If you haven't done HTML yet, don't worry. It is the language of browsers for displaying data or displaying web pages. And I highly recommend Jess's Bootcamp here on ClassCentral.com, where she does web development and is a far kinder and better teacher than I am. So let's see. And if you're not familiar with HTML, we'll just walk through it. We're declaring an HTML block of data with a body. Yeah, here we open the body and we close the body. Now, in ES6 in the browser, we can store JavaScript in modules. So what does that mean? It means that if we want to bring some ES6 JavaScript into a web page, we will be using a script tag with the type set to module. This lets us bring in some JavaScript code. Doing wrong here. I guess we'll find out in just a moment. I didn't close it correctly. My bad. So we'll also have a source of where that JavaScript file is. And then we'll close out that script tag. So when we want to bring ES6 into HTML, we can do that with script type module with the source set to the JavaScript file name, and then close off that script tag. So let's take a look at our exercise. add a script to the HTML document of type module and give it the source file of index.js. So here we've got one script type module, fantastic, but the source is filename.js, and usually JS is the file type for JavaScript. So let's do index.js. And in theory, that should be everything we need. However, I think this is important for the next couple of exercises. A script that uses this module type can now use import and export, because we can have JavaScript files import and export functionality from each other. Let's run our tests. And there we go. Pat, pat. And we're going to be doing just that. So if we want to be able to make a function or a value available to be imported in another JavaScript file, for example, imagine a file called mathfunctions.js that contains several functions related to mathematical operations. One of them is stored in a variable add that takes in two numbers and returns their sum. It's what we've seen before. Add with an arrow function that takes two parameters and has a function x and y. However, we now have something called export. That means that if we were interacting with this in other files, then we would be able to import this add function. That means that if I wanted to have this add function in several JavaScript files, instead of writing it out several times in lots of files, I can just have it in one file called mathfunctions.js and then import it into any of those other files. But in the file itself where you're writing math functions, you need to export it to make it available. So when you export a variable or function, you can import it in another file and use it without having to rewrite the code. You can export multiple things by repeating the first example for each thing you want to export by placing them all in an export block like this as well. So let's take a look at our code now. We've got uppercase string, which returns string.toUppercase, and lowercase string, which returns string.toLowercase. I want to play around with these first. Console log uppercase string hello world. Notice what it does. It returns that string.toUppercase, which makes all of it uppercase. Let's try with lowercase. Lowercase string. Same thing, except now it's turning everything into lowercase. Hello world. Now, if I want to make these two functions available for importing in other files, I will call export keyword, and then inside these curly brackets, comma separate each thing that I want to export, which in this case is the function uppercase string and the function lowercase string. There we go. Export both of them using the method of your choice. Now, if we had this in a project with lots of files, we'd now be able to import uppercase string and lowercase string from this file. Let's run our tests. There we go. Pat, pat. On to the next one. Lovely. In this exercise, let's imagine we're in a different file now, and we want to use uppercase and lowercase string. Let's take a look at the exercise real quick. Add the appropriate import statement that will allow the current file to use the uppercase string and lowercase string functions that you exported in the previous lessons. These functions are in a file called stringfunctions.js, which is in the same directory as the current file. What does that mean? We want to use uppercase string and lowercase string, right? But if we take a look at the output, reference error, uppercase string is not defined. Now, I could write out those functions in this file, but if we do that, that's kind of missing the point of having a special file where we have these helpers. So these functions are in a file called stringfunctions.js. And if we take a look at an import statement from the example here, we can call import keyword, and then in curly brackets, the names of the things we want to import. Then we'll have from, and then the file itself. Now you see a dot and a /. What's that about? This is saying, hey, import it from the file mathfunctions.js, which is in this folder, the same folder that I'm in right now. But what is me? That is the file that I'm working in. So each file of JavaScript exists in a folder, right? Say in Finder or in Windows Explorer or in whatever the Linux equivalent of your distro of choice is. Right? You've got your files and you've got your folders. Now, this is saying this mathfunctions.js is in the same file, in the same folder as the file I'm currently working in. But back to our exercise, we can import, let's see, uppercase string and lowercase case string from, and then we'll need the location of string functions.js, which is string underscore functions.js. Cool. String underscore functions.js. Now you'll see this is no longer failing. Why? Because now we've imported those functions from that module, from that file. It's no longer failing, which is good. Let's run our tests. And there we go. Pat, pat. Now I know we're at the top of the hour, but I do want to do one or two more just to leave you with not too much homework. Because it's possible to import everything into a variable, or into a module, which is kind of weird, but bear with me. Let's take a look at the exercise code here. We got string functions.uppercase string set to with a parameter hello. Then we got string functions.lowercase string with world. We got a reference error in our code saying string functions is not defined. Now let's say that string functions, let me just scroll down a little bit. Let's say that the file stringfunctions.js has lots of functions in it. What if we wanted to import all of them right away? We can do that with import star. And that's saying, hey, import everything into something, into some kind of object, which I will call as string functions. So this is saying, hey, import all of the functions and store them in an object called string functions from string underscore functions.js. This is passing now, but I want to console log that. Console log string functions. Have a look and see what's inside. Now, nothing is showing up because I would assume, what happened here? Sorry, I think I opened my dev tools by accident. Console log.string functions is not really showing up. I was hoping to be able to inspect the inside of it, but I don't think for this exercise console logging is allowed. Usually in any place you can console log, no problem. Some of the exercises in FreeCodeCamp can be a little bit weird and not show us our console logging, which is unfortunate because I would really like to see what's inside that. Hello? Yeah, see, it's not showing up. And I think that's because of this specific exercise. But I'm going to ask all of you to trust me in saying that console.log, let me remove that console log. All of these functions inside that file that are being exported are being stored in this object called string functions. And it's an object with a function called uppercase string and a function called lowercase string. And what we want to do for this exercise is requires the contents of the file string functions.js that is in the same directory. Use the import as syntax to import everything from the file into an object called string functions, which we've done here on line 1. Let's run our tests. And it's passing. Pat, pat. Let's submit and go to the next one. Ooh. So we will do one or two more exercises. Again, sorry, folks. I just want to make sure that we're covering as much as possible before going into Q&A, and I will extend the Q&A accordingly if my assistant Galbrush doesn't mind a little bit of overtime. If not, I can do it by myself. It should be okay. So what we can do with exporting is also do an export default. This allowed you to make multiple functions and variables for use with other files. But with export default, you can export one single thing as the default export. So for example, if we wanted to export only subtract, this function subtract, we can do export default function subtract. Right? And that means that when we import it, we will just import that one export. Yeah? It can be a little confusing, but bear with me. So if we export default one function, which is subtract, then we'll be able to import it directly, which we'll see in the next exercise. Since export default is used to declare a fallback value for a module or file, you can only have one value to be a default export in each module or file. Additionally, you cannot use export default with var, let, or const. Sounds good to me. The following function should be the fallback value for the module. Please add the necessary code to do so. So this export default will be the default export of this file, which let's say has some math operations, but we just want to export the subtract function. Let's run our tests. There we go. Pat, pat. Last exercise for today. So why do that export default if we can just do an export with one single object in it? This is where import comes in. So instead of doing import and then, with the curly braces, subtract from, what's the name of the file? Math functions. Math _functions.js. When we're doing an export default, we don't need this object syntax. We don't need these curly brackets. We can just say, hey, just import the default thing. Mitch is asking something I want to answer as we slide into Q&A. If you have an export default, can you have another export in the file if it's not the default? No, you cannot. So export default will be just the only thing that gets exported. That's a good question. That's why I wanted to answer it right away. So our exercise, we're importing subtract from mathfunctions.js. Import the default export from the mathfunctions.js file found in the same directory as this file. Give the import the name subtract, which we've done. Import subtract from mathfunctions.js. And in line 4, we do subtract 7 and 4. Can we console log that? I don't know if it's working. Console.log. It is not. Some of these later exercises, sometimes console log doesn't work. So if it doesn't show up, don't worry. It's a bit weird. Let's run our tests. And there we go. One last pat, and we will submit. And the next exercise will be promises, which are kind of like pieces of code that will only get executed if something succeeds. This I will leave to you as homework because, yes, we're at the top. Well, we're a little bit past the top of the hour. My apologies. So we've done 25 out of the 29 exercises for ES6. Scroll all the way to the bottom of that. Your homework will be to do the rest of these exercises, which are all to do with promises. Next week, on Monday, we will be starting with regular expressions. So again, homework is to finish ES6. ES6 did a lot, and I want to commend all of you for sticking around with this because we introduced a lot of new concepts, and we also do very quickly a lot of new concepts. So if you're lost, I just want to assure you, you are not alone. When I was learning this stuff at this pace, I also got lost. When I was learning this stuff afterwards, I got lost. So don't worry. Do the exercises again, rewatch the videos, and I highly recommend and I see some people doing this, I want to shout out some specific people, but I want to respect their privacy. I would love to shout them out because they've been absolutely wonderful at answering questions in the forum. If you're curious about the forum, that's group.classcentral.com. If you're curious about signing up for the bootcamp, that's classcentral.com. We have a Discord server as well that you will find in the bootcamp dashboard as well as in the forum. So please come in, ask lots of questions, answer questions. I'm telling you, explaining stuff is like a secret key for learning. All right, let's hop right in and do some Q&A. Can we get the first question, please? Can we add a tab using backticks? I think the best way to answer that is to try it out. Whoops. Sorry. Let me go to template literals. And I know this is going to be bad, but I'm going to delete everything in here. And let's console log a template literal. Hello. There's our template literal. Can we add tabs? Oh, world. There you go. There's our tab. So yes, you can add tabs. Next question. How do I give extra spaces in template literals? As you would a string. Space, 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 space. There you go. Yeah, it's just like a string, except you can do more things with it. Next question, please. Can we use the arrow function inside objects? I don't think so. Const object equals, let's make an object with a property yummy. Call this big. And a function called eat, which we learned with ES6 can be defined like this. Amount. Console log. Hey, this is taste. This is so taste. I ate amount. So bread.eat 4. Oh, well, look what I forgot to do. I tried to refer to the taste property of this object, but since it's not available inside the function, I need to do this.taste. There we go. Hey, this is so yummy, I ate 4. Now, what you're wondering is, can we do arrow functions? Let's find out. No. No, we cannot. Or can we? What if I were to do eat, which is a function? Now we've tried to, hold on. So we're seeing it looks like this kind of works, but we got an error. It cannot read properties of undefined. So it looks like with this arrow function, we don't really have access to the this anymore. But what does that mean? What is this now? Hey, this is so undefined, I ate 4. So we were able to define that arrow function, which you saw, as a property. So this is the key, and the value is the function. But look at that. I lost access to this. This is now undefined. So you can, but I would recommend sticking with the ES6 way of doing it because that gives us access to the object itself. Hey, this is so object, I ate 4. This.taste. That's a good question. Thank you. Do the next one. Is there an advantage of using the ES6 syntax for classes instead of ES5 syntax? Doesn't seem simpler to me. I got to be honest with you, 12 Zara. I don't know what ES5 class looks like. So let's try that out. Let's go on DuckDuckGo real quick and do ES5 class syntax. Now, I don't want to get too lost in different syntaxes. So let's look at MDN real quick. There's our syntax for making a class in ES6, I believe. But how do we do it in ES5? ES5. Classes in JavaScript are built on prototypes, but also have some syntax and semantics that are not shared with ES5 class-like semantics. I don't know what that means. How do you do ES5 classes? Can you do classes in ES5? ES5, of course, being an older version of ECMAScript. I would ask you, Tolzara, to please post some information on that. But it's a good question. Thank you. Let's do the next one. Aside from capital camel case, do class names follow other variable naming conventions, as in $, underscore, and can start with a number? I mean, the best way to find out is to try. Class bread. No, it's with me in bread. I must be hungry. Constructor this.taste equals good. So there's our class. Let's say const bread equals new bread. Bread. Console log bread.taste. Yeah, there we go. Good. Now, what you're wondering is, can it start with a $? Let's find out. Where's our $? Where's our $? See? So you can. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. Let's try it with an underscore. You can also start it with an underscore. Again, I don't recommend it. And with numbers, aha! No, you cannot start it with numbers. So yes, it totally can. What's the next one? Can we have only one constructor in one class? Let's find out. I would say, yes, you can only have one constructor, but what happens if you go and define two? This taste equals bad. Aha! There's our error. Duplicate constructor in the same class. So no, you cannot. I'm glad that y'all are asking these questions. If there's no function inside an object, can we still use this? So let's look at an object real quick. I think I had an object before. Let me just do some undoing. Sorry, folks, just getting that. There we go. So what you're saying is, if there is no function, can we still use this? Other taste is equals to this dot taste. Let's try it out. Aha! No, we cannot. Cannot read properties of undefined reading taste. So no, we cannot, because this does not refer to the object, and we're not really running a block of code here. We're just running an expression. Next question, please. Is HTML or CSS necessary for JS? Let's take a look at FreeCodeCamp for just a second, because I want to give that answer with a lot of caveats. Now, the order that you see here of the certifications is a recommended order for doing the learning. So they recommend doing responsive web design first, then JavaScript, then front end. But this is usually the order in which it comes. You can totally do backend JavaScript without needing to understand HTML or CSS. If you wanted to go into web development, I would recommend learning these three core parts of the web: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So do you need to know HTML and CSS in order to do JavaScript? Sorry, I hit the microphone. Do you need to do HTML and CSS to understand JavaScript? In my opinion, no. But some of the exercises in the ES6 section do assume that you've been exposed to some HTML and CSS. And I want to take a second to once again plug my dear friend Jess's really good bootcamp that's currently going on web development. Check it out. All right, next question. Sorry, just want to highlight one tiny thing from Newton VK saying, where are these questions being asked? You can find them in the chat. So be it here on Twitch or on YouTube. So you can ask questions there here on Twitch as well. Just wanted to point that out real quick. Sorry, Galrush, next question, please. Do we have any guidance on how to name internal properties of a class? E.g., in this example, we use ftemp. Could it have been temp or Fahrenheit or anything else? I went with ftemp just because Fahrenheit is hard to type and I will make a mistake. For example, let me show you what I mean. Let me just start up any exercise. I'm going to start up the first one. Const Fahrenheit. I don't know why, but my muscle memory wants to spell it like height. It's not correct. It's Fahrenheit. Because I know I'm going to make mistakes and it's a temperature, I made a shortcut for myself to call it ftemp. Because then if you compare with ctemp, it kind of gives, like, from context, I and probably my my colleagues working with me on the code can kind of go like, oh yeah, it's Fahrenheit temperature and Celsius temperature. So there's no real convention there. I hope that helps. Let's go to the next question. If you create an object without defining a class, what is the downhill of that? Do we always need to declare class and then create objects from that class? If you create an object without defining a class, what's the downside? Okay. I love this question. Let's go look at a class real quick. Sorry, I'm going to scroll down rather fast. I apologize. Here we go. ECMAScript 5. Let's go to classes. I need a class. Let's go to that book one. Now let's take a look at this real quick. Okay. So every book that is made from this class is going to be an object called book with a property called author. But we could also, as you correctly say, just make, let's say, const book1 is equals to author George, const book2 author Geraldine, right? So this is the equivalent of creating two instances of the class book. However, we don't have the setter and getter and setters anymore. That's one thing. Second, if you're creating lots of authors, right? Lots of books, doing it from a class will guarantee that they will always have an author and they will always have the getters and setters. Because when you're writing them out like this, you might forget. So really, this is a wrapper around making this simpler. This is mostly the advantage. There are other advantages too, which we'll cover later on when we talk about object-oriented programming. Just before we go to the next question, I just want to answer this one from Hamza saying, is this the same bootcamp that was run in Jan? Yes, this is the second cohort of this JavaScript bootcamp. Thank you for asking. Next question, please. Oh, good. We're talking about books. Great. Will it be wrong if I use book writer u if writer is a setter function? Let's find out. So I don't know. So const book1 is a new book with an author, Geraldine. Okay. Let's console log book1. Got an author called Geraldine. Now what you're asking is, can we do book1.writer Gerard? Check it out. We're getting an error. Book1.writer is not a function. That's because this writer here is a setter. That means we would have to write book.writer equals Gerard. Console log book1 now. There's Gerard. Great question. Thank you. Let's do the next one. In module, do we create a file different from JS as to export and import? I'm not sure I understand the question. If you if we are using a JavaScript module, if we're importing a JavaScript module, this gives us access to be able to export and import. I hope that makes sense. In loading scripts in HTML, why should we always put it in the body tag and not in the header tag? That's not necessarily true. You can put a script anywhere in the HTML and it'll be loaded as the HTML file is read. So in this example, we put it in the body, but we can put it elsewhere as well. Love that y'all are asking all these questions. Next one, please. Would it be okay if we only learn very good ES6 and don't pay much attention to the older versions? I mean it as a personal choice, not referring to the bootcamp, of course. I think most modern JavaScript will be written in ES6. Now, older browsers don't support ES6, right? For example, I don't know, Internet Explorer, the older versions of Internet Explorer don't support ES6. So what does that mean? It means that if you try and write ES6, it won't work in Internet Explorer, and you want to support as many browsers as possible. However, when you're writing JavaScript for modern JavaScript, what a lot of projects do is do something called transpiling, which means it takes the ES6 JavaScript and turns it and automatically compiles it or turns it into old school JavaScript, so that it can work in older browsers or in places where ES6 is not supported. This means that writing ES6, absolutely great, especially if you're going to be working in a team that uses it. However, if you ever come across some kind of context where you will need to understand some of like the prototype, which is pretty old school JavaScript now that we have classes, then it might be good to understand that. But in general, you won't find that case as much. So yes, I absolutely recommend focusing on ES6. What did I want to say? And ES6 and yeah, because for debugging older things, we've got tools to help us with that as well. Love this question. Thank you. Next question, please. How can we compare two objects? Ooh, okay. Let's do that. So const book 1. Let's say it has an author, Gerard, with a capital G, please. I forgot my semicolon. Const book 2 is equals to author Georgina. So let's console log book 1 is equals to book 2. They're not, of course. They have different authors. But what happens if they have the same author? That they are still false. What if I do a 3 equals? Still false. Because these authors might have the same properties, but they're not the same object. What? Let's try that again. Check this out. If I compare book1.author and book2.author, then they're true because they're both Gerard. But the object itself is not the same. But there's the ticket to comparing objects. Compare their properties. Check that the author is the same, check that the title is the same, check, etc., etc., etc. In fact, and I'm just going to throw out an idea here, is equal. Be a function that, forgot my comma, that takes in another book. We will return book1.author equals another, I forgot the strict equals, another book.author. Now, check this out. If I call book1.is equal to another book, book 2. Now it's going to return true because it's comparing the authors. And if we had more properties, then we would say, for example, and, where's my and? There, book 1. Oh, wait, it's not book 1. Sorry, it's this. Another book dot title is equals to this dot title. That's going to give us an error. Oh no, never mind. Of course, both titles are undefined. That's why. Right. So this is how you could compare two objects, in my opinion. Next question, please. Isn't JavaScript better than Python? I think this comes down to your opinion. Python and JavaScript are also used in different concepts, different contexts. For example, let's take a look. For example, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Yeah. JavaScript, great for front end, great for back end. Python, also great for back end, but Python also has the ability to do scientific computing, data analysis, lots of support in the Python community for these scientific computing, data analysis, machine learning. All of this stuff is, pretty solidly supported in Python, as well as doing other things. So it really comes down to preference. A programming language is a tool, and it's not really about whether one is better than the other. It's more about using the right tool for the job. Good question, though. And I want to just highlight one thing Carlos said. Even empty object is equals to empty object is false, because they are different empty objects. How wild is that? Next question, please. What are subclasses? I will actually, it's a good question. Regular expressions, debugging, basic data structures, object-oriented programming, dot notation. Let me see, because I'm pretty sure, or at least I hope, we don't have our subclasses in this bootcamp? Okay, fine. We'll do some subclasses. All right. Bear with me, folks. Let's say we have a class called animal. And every animal will take a constructor, which is name. This dot name is equals to name. And we'll have eat. No. Can fly, which is false. Sorry, can fly is a function that returns false. Okay, so let's assume that all animals cannot fly. Now we're going to have what's called a subclass. Let's start with an animal that, class penguin, which extends animal. And let's leave that as is for just a moment. Okay, let's leave that as empty. Let's make a new penguin and see what's going on. Const pingu is equals to new penguin. So we've made a new instance of penguin. Okay. Pingu dot, let's console log pingu dot can fly. It will give us, oh, I forgot a name. Pingu, silly me. So can Pingu fly? False. Why? Because the class that penguin extends from, animal, defines a function called can fly, which is set to false. So class inherits as a subclass. Penguin inherits all of the properties of animal. Yeah? So the class penguin inherits from animal, extends animal. So Pingu can be defined with a name. Let's try that out. Name is Pingu. That's good. And it cannot fly. But what's the point of this? Because right now we're not really extending animal to do anything. However, what if we had an animal that could fly? Like, say, parrot. We're going to define here a function called canFly that returns true. Const loro is equals to new parrot with a name Polly. All right, here's a standard. Instead of Loro, let's call this Polly. All right, so this is a new parrot with the name Polly. Let's console log Polly.name. It's called Polly. What happens when I call can fly on the parrot? Let's find out. Do we think it's going to be true or false? It's going to be true. This is because parrot as a subclass overrides the function can fly. But why would we want to do this? That's because we can define Polly as an animal. Of course, animals can't fly. If we do it as a parrot, they can. And we can have lots of subclasses. Class, let's go back with penguin. Extends animal. Okay. Was new penguin called Pingu. I know that because penguins and parrots are subclasses of animals, that I'll be able to read out their name. They share this property of a name. Polly, if I do pingu.name, Pingu. They share these properties. So I can, instead of having to write lots of classes that will be sharing properties, we can have a single superclass, as it's called. The animal is a superclass that has all of these properties, and then each subclass can add additional properties. And as Yash correctly says, this is similar to the notion of inheritance in C++. I'd even go a step further and say this is the same concept as inheritance in C++. We're going to cover similar things during the object-oriented programming module. Now, what I've just explained is beyond the scope of this bootcamp. So if it all doesn't make sense, don't worry. But if it does, fabulous. You have been exposed to it, which is the most important part. We got any other question? We got any other questions? Suppose if I have nested HTML elements, for example, P class first, span second, span P. How can we set inner text values of P and span using JavaScript? How can we set inner text? Suppose I have nested HTML elements. So a P has a nested span. Okay. How can we set inner text values of P and span using JavaScript? I suppose you could, let's take a look. We're going to do a little bit beyond the scope here. We're going to do some browser JavaScript. And actually, Carlos already explained it. Try this in any page after opening the console. Document.querySelector.html.innerText equals hola. And that's exactly it. So you can do document.querySelector and then put in the selector of an HTML element, and then you can manipulate its inner text with to be the content of that HTML element, or any element for that matter. 12 Zara says, sorry, I'm late for my question. I had to pause and come back. You're good. My question was about advantages of ES6 syntax over ES5 syntax with classes. Yash says, since JavaScript follows object-oriented programming, how come ES5 doesn't have classes? So I'm a bit confused. I have to be very, very honest, folks. I don't know if it's possible to. I don't know if ES5 has classes. ES5 is an older JavaScript, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's unrelated to the bootcamp. 12 Zara, I would really appreciate it if you could show us or link us to a piece of documentation on ES5 classes. But I do want to answer your question, Yash. How come ES5 doesn't have classes? I don't know if it does or doesn't. I've never used ES5. But classes in JavaScript the way they are here are introduced with ES6. So JavaScript does do a form of object-oriented programming that if you're coming from like Python or something might look a little bit strange. And we'll get into it during the object-oriented programming module. Carlos. Here we go. Thank you very much. Document.querySelector P bigger than span inner text. If this looks confusing, also recommend checking out the Web Development Bootcamp, which will explain a little bit about these query selectors. Oh, James says classes pre-ES6 were terrible. I'll take your word for it. Thanks you, James Harris. I have to admit, I've never used them, so I don't know. So I think, do we have any questions left? Okay, I'm going to ask this question from Kelly. Is there any time duration for someone to get to before becoming good at code? Do you know what, Kelly? Have you watched last week's guest session? What is it called? Learning how to learn, I think. Here, let me just post a quick link, if I may. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So last Thursday, we ran a guest session with Dr. Barbara Oakley and Zach Cáceres. Here's a link. Check it out. I think it's a good motivator to understand how it is that the brain works for learning. There is no set path, and I'm sorry to say that. For different people, depending on the things you do, it's going to be different. So there's no set amount of time, in my opinion. Michael says ES5 used prototypes. Funny thing you mentioned that, Michael, because we are going to be doing prototypes later on in this boot camp. I do want to answer this question from Ali. Could you please explain the behind the scenes of classes? Because is it a syntactic sugar at the end of the day? It is absolutely a syntactic sugar around the prototypes. We're going to be getting into prototypes later on in the boot camp. So hold that thought. We're going to get there. But yes, it is a syntactic sugar. It is a wrapper of code around prototypes. And we're going to see when we get to prototypes why it's something you might prefer to do. Vivek is saying, I know we can use query selector, but with nested elements, there is a problem. That's why I asked. And I think going by what Carlos said, right? P bigger than span. What you could do, Vivek, is use literals. So let's say you have document.querySelector. I think your class was called first, but inner text is equals to, and here you can do your span with whatever. Do span content, span key content. As an example, this is one thing you can do. Okay, let's see what other questions we got. Asante is asking, can you talk about exporting between JSX and JS file extensions like in React? So, fun fact about JSX. JSX is a special file type. You might have seen it when working in React. You might have seen JSX. Unrelated to this bootcamp, so I'm just going to take a moment to answer that. So what the JSX engine does is convert that JSX code that kind of looks like HTML, but has some JavaScript niceties to it, and generates a bunch of React statements or equivalent statements to put that into the virtual DOM of the React project. In short, this means React will look at a JSX file and go like, I know what to do with that. And that's the difference. It's a good question. But yes, definitely off topic. Why do we use async in promises? I would recommend taking a look at the promises section of ES6, where you will do then, but Async essentially allows us to skip some of the boilerplate of writing promises and interacting with promises. So if anything, it's, and you'll see this often with ES6, syntactic sugar. It's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, we can call it a day. I will make some announcements while people get their last chance to write up some questions. First of all, I want to remind us that this is the last session of this week. We will be back next Monday. Let's take a look at our homework real quick. Our homework is to do the rest of the exercises in ES6, and I would recommend revising this content. We covered a lot in the last 2 days, and it can oftentimes be confusing or conflicting with the things we've already done. So please ask questions to each other. Remember, there is a forum, there is a Discord. Use them. Tomorrow, we will be having a guest session. We will be having the wonderful Stuart Langridge to talk about games and side projects with a Q&A. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I recommend coming by. The time slot will be correct. Sorry about last week. The time slot, pardon me, will be in the dashboard of Class Central's bootcamps. Let's see if we got any. Oh, censor. Boilerplate meaning, please. Yes. Boilerplate in this case means code that you write several times as a sort of like template, right? As a sort of like code you write every time you want to do something. For example, when you define a class, you will define a class and a constructor. That is the boilerplate of a class. So when you're doing classes, or when you're doing promises, there are some boilerplate of then that you will see, or catch. When you do these exercises in ES6, you will confront those, and they've simplified these. You don't see this in the bootcamp, but one way to simplify this is with 2 keywords called async and await. I will bring those up here on MDN because I think they're worth looking at. Async, await, not just async. I'm gonna drop that in the chat. Read up on this after you do the promises stuff. My recommendation. Yeah. I like that. Like a snippet. Yeah, it's like a snippet. I like that. That's good. Interpret is asking, can you make a cheat sheet like in which scenario you need to use ES6 and when to stick with ES5? And I think I covered that a little bit. As I said, most projects will be written nowadays in ES6. So there's no scenario where ES5 would be better than ES6 unless you're writing for an old browser. However, most JavaScript tools nowadays will automatically take your ES6 code and turn it into ES5. Yeah? Again, ES6 will be turned into ES5 or older JavaScript. So I would say in most scenarios, stick to ES6 and use your tools so that you don't have to write ES5. Question from Brian. Will there be a difference of JavaScript in React? So are you asking like what's the difference between JavaScript and React, or are you asking is JavaScript in React different? Let's go with the first questions. I mean, JavaScript is a programming language. React is a framework that uses JavaScript. Second question, is JavaScript in React different? A little bit. I mean, so in React, which is a web framework, which allows us to make websites, we're interacting with the browser. So the JavaScript that's written in the browser will have things like document, keywords like document, query selector, which you saw a little bit about today. We'll have keywords like navigating pages, interacting with the browser essentially. So in React, you will have also additional things that people use like JSX, which I covered a little bit about. This bootcamp is not going to do React. So we're sticking to the JavaScript programming language and its data structures and algorithms. But yeah, I hope that covers it a little bit. All right. Well, we are well past time. Again, guest session tomorrow, Stuart Langridge. congratulations on making it through your second week of the bootcamp. We've covered a lot and you've asked lots of questions and I appreciate it. Keep going, folks. Answer questions, ask questions, and never be afraid to do so. The best way, like even nowadays, there are things, as you can see when some of this Q&A, there are things that I've been programming for over 10 years and I don't know some things, or I need to look things up. Yeah. Don't get overwhelmed with stuff. Carlos is saying there is a problem with React. People use TypeScript a lot, more things to learn. Yeah, we tend to throw lots of things on each other at once. There is no set path. As said, this bootcamp, I believe, is helpful to just understand the fundamentals of the programming language itself, which you can then use as a springboard to go into things like React, into things like Node.js, into things like TypeScript, which again, this is just the fundamentals. Mitch is asking at what time is the guest session? I don't have the time. I think in UTC that'll be 5 p.m. because for me it'll be 7 p.m. Yeah. Check it out on the class central dashboard. You'll find the exact time there. Great. This week was so intense, says MMM. Yeah, it was intense, huh? We did a lot. So, kudos to all of you. Take your time this weekend. I would recommend to go over this stuff again. It is a lot, but it is helpful. And yeah, just keep asking questions. We've got the forums. We've got the Discord. I'm going to let you all go. It's the last day of the week for learning, but don't forget, it's guest session tomorrow. Super fun. And it's a good way to learn. So yeah, folks, thanks again. Have the most wonderful day. And I'll see you, well, tomorrow, but also on Monday.